So find your stuff that you love and talk about it and find ways to relate it back to your business.
Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast, presented by Hippo Direct. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, digital marketing dude at Hippo Direct, and you can reach me at max@hippodirect.com for help using your podcast as a marketing tool. This is episode number, Why Was 6 Afraid of 7? Because 7, 8, 9. And today's guest is Marissa Corcoran. Marissa is an incredible copywriter who's been featured in Business Insider, and she takes a very unique approach to copywriting. She applies tactics that she learned from her acting days when she studied acting and theater at Harvard, and uses that to bring messaging to life for small business owners and entrepreneurs. She's the creator of the Copy Chat Summit and the Copy Confidence Society, and she may know a thing about pop culture as well. You will see as Marissa explains it all. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with the killer copy champion, Marissa Corcoran. How you doing today, Marissa?
Hey, Max. I'm well. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And we're going to get into a lot about copy today and how to be good at copywriting and all the amazing things it can do for your business and growing your brand. But before we get into that, I want to talk about Harvard, as I do with every guest.
Okay.
So
It's a great
Harvard.
way to start.
Yes, I know you spent some time at Harvard. So for anybody who's not familiar, would just probably assume that you studied law or business, right?
I'm sure that they would, and no, not even close.
So you definitely took a different path. Can you talk a little bit about your time at Harvard and what you learned from your interest in fine arts and the acting world?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually went to Harvard to get my MFA in acting, which an MFA stands for Masters of Fine Arts. So it's the highest performing arts degree that you can get as a performer, as an actor.
Oh, wow.
So I got my MFA in acting there. And, one of the biggest things that I kind of learned there was, that you really needed to not only, be a great actor, but also, have really, if when you're on stage with somebody, you have to have this really great intention with them before you can even start a scene. You have to know, like, what do you want to get from that other person? So I learned pretty quickly, like, how do I, have relationships with people? How do I have a good relationship with my scene partner, my, acting? I learned so many kind of life skills as well. And so when I went back to New York after that, I realized okay, I have an agent now, and, acting was what I was pursuing, but I needed something that I could do on the side so that I could show up for auditions and such. And that's kind of how I fell into writing, was that a friend of mine told me, hey, this was back in 2013. So it was kind of a little bit where the online kind of coaching space was still a little bit of the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
And people were, and a friend of mine said, hey, you can write for people online. And I was like, really? And I had a writing experience from undergrad. So I thought I would be good at it. So that's kind of how I started out, was every new client just taught me something new about myself as a copywriter. And I really, truly learned on the job and took a lot of those skills with me that I had at Harvard about, establishing really great relationships with people and being somebody, really great to work with and responsive with rather.
Let's say you never were interested in acting and you never had that part of your life or that interest in your life. How different do you think you would be today as a copywriter?
Oh gosh, I don't think I would be as good, because I think that everything that I learned as an actor about being a leading lady as an actor, you can apply the same things to yourself as a copywriter. So for example, when I was saying about creating those relationships from an acting standpoint, before we would start any scene, my teacher Scott would make us stand up on stage and he'd say, if you and I were doing a scene together, Max, he'd be like, okay, Marisa, what do you want to get from Max in this scene? What's your intention?
This is a true story, by the way.
This is a true story. And I'd be like, I want to get Max to ask me to be on his podcast by the end of this conversation, like on
Damn.
stage. Be like, I want Max to swallow a bitter pill. I want Max to become an ally. You know what I mean? Like you had to say these intentions and you could not start the scene until you knew exactly what you wanted to get from the other actor. And if Scott didn't think it was the right thing, he'd say, nope, not specific enough. Nope, not specific enough. And we would have to do things like this. So there's an example right there so that when I teach my clients and my students how to do, let's say, email marketing, that's how I set them up. I say, before you even write this email, what's the intention? What do you want the reader to get from this by reading this? How do you want them to feel? What kind of action do you want them to take? And I talk about it from an acting standpoint. I tell this story a lot. And I think it's a way for people to wrap their brain around it they haven't heard before, because I bring all those actor elements into it, if that makes sense.
It does. It definitely does. And it's bringing me back to my days on stage with you. So a lot of nostalgia here.
I love that.
No, but there's clearly a lot of parallels there. When you think back from the acting standpoint, what was the most difficult part of acting? Because as we know, the best actors and actresses make it look so easy, but there's so much that goes on literally behind the scenes.
Yeah. So as an actor, there's like on stage and off stage. So I would say on stage, the hardest thing about being an actor, especially in the theater world, is knowing that every night really is going to be different. So it's like if you've nailed a performance the night before and you felt that energy, and then sometimes you go out and do that same character again, you think that it'll be the same and it won't be. And so sometimes you can be really hard on yourself. Like, gosh, last night's performance was so awesome. I cried the real tears, like whatever it is. I felt, Max and I had that scene was so great. And then we go to do it the next day and, maybe it's just different. So it's accepting that the energy changes. And that's another thing that I talk to my clients about from a business standpoint is like, even when you launch something, the next time you do it, there's going to be a different energy and you have to kind of feel that energy and ride it and go with the new energy and not try to manipulate everything so much. And then off stage, I would say the hardest thing about being an actor, of course, is the rejection. As an actor, you spend more time not being an actor at first than you do being an actor, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so it's
no,
it's staying, it's showing up still to auditions and knowing that audition may be the only time you act that week, that month, that year for some people.
It just sounds cutthroat. And
it is cutthroat.
Good. Well, it sounds like it, but I think it's something that can relate to whatever line of business you're in, is because there's these moments in our days, our weeks, our months when we have to be on and we have to deliver if we want to achieve the goals that we want. And so, it's very clear cut and cutthroat in the acting world, like when you need to be on. But there's, kind of more blurred examples in other lines of work. How do you get yourself to be prepared and focused and confidence, whether it's like an audition or whether it's your first time performing on stage to a new audience? Like, how do you funnel that and deliver?
Yeah, I think I have a very specific routine. So I remember when I was auditioning for Harvard, right? I knew there were 5 schools that I auditioned for grad school. And I remember being told that, you might have to audition for a couple of years before you get accepted. That sometimes people audition for the same schools, maybe 3 years, and they finally get accepted. So my coach and I were like, we're really just going in to practice, make a good impression, and knowing that this might not happen this time. So I had a very, very specific routine that I've always taken with me, which I actually learned from my undergrad in theater. So I had 2 teachers. One teacher was very like Zen-like. We would do Tai Chi and warm up to, if anybody knows Lorena McKennett, we would like warm up to this. And we would do Tai Chi and like meditation. And another teacher who before we would go on stage was all like the kind of the games and running around and getting a lot of energy. And so I remember fast forward to when I was preparing to go into these auditions, I kind of created a world of both, which was like, I would take that moment to center myself. And then I would have that kind of fun, like little dance party to get the energy going. So I had kind of both running through my veins when I would go in the room. So I had a very specific routine with myself, like mantras, I would say. And this is how I did whenever I go on stage. And even before I get on calls with people or before I teach now, it's the same thing. I do the same thing. I sit for a moment and have about like 5 minutes of like just a quiet meditation, just 5 minutes. I then listen to a song called 96,000 from the musical In the Heights, which gets me pumped up. And then I just take a moment where I say, let me be of just like of service and like an open vessel for whoever I'm speaking to, whether it's a sales call or I'm teaching. And that's the same thing I used to do before I went into any audition. It's just the same.
That's awesome. I think of, I like to do before I record a podcast interview, I like to embody the Johnny Drama Awooga from Entourage, where he
Yeah.
claps and turns around. And
I
then,
love that. And that's your trigger. That's how you get into like the character almost of being like Max, the awesome podcast host.
oh, well, thank you. But, your check is in the mail. But
Thank you.
but like no matter what, like dancing around or like just doing something goofy, like I remember like there's an NBA player, if you know, Danny Green, who I'm not even going to say what team he's on now because he bounces around a lot depending when you listen to this, but the Cavs drafted him, my team, the Cavs drafted him, and his thing coming from North Carolina, he was like known in college for dancing on the bench before the game started, and he brought that to the NBA as well. And so it's like it's even like pro basketball players just like dancing around or trying to be loose before games. So it's really it's cool to hear that you do that from the acting and now with the business standpoint as well.
Absolutely. And you find that a lot of top performers, no matter where they are, they do this. You know, you heard, I don't know if you let Michael Phelps used to talk about like he had to have like his hood up, the music on, like he
Oh
had
yeah,
all these things before he had to get in the pool. And I
right.
think like even as business owners, it's the same thing. Like you're showing you are the face of it all. So it even matter, you know, just as much as an athlete would, you're doing the same thing. And so I kind of took that with me from the acting world. Like, you know, going into those auditions for grad school was scary. And also, you were in a room of a ton of other people. So it's like, how could I protect my own energy? Because there were other girls that looked like me that maybe were going to do the monologue I was going to do. And so you just had to like protect yourself before you went in the room.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I got into the program I wanted, which was Harvard on my first year of auditioning, was because I was that focused and I had that strict of a routine for myself.
Well, it clearly came through, and so I mean, you just have a terrible resume. You went to terrible schools, and but I want to get to the copywriting world. And so you kind of alluded to this earlier when you mentioned that one of your peers kind of recommended that you should start writing for people and that you had a natural skill with it. At what point did this pick up enough that you realized that it could be actually a business for you and eventually, your main priority and passion?
Yeah. So when I started doing it in 2013 to 2014, I still, you know, acting was my main focus. And I really was like, okay, I knew I couldn't go back to my other kind of side gigs, that I needed something that I could do and had a flexible schedule. But for a while, I was still, and this is true. So I was acting, I was auditioning rather. I was writing for clients, starting to get some retainer clients and get some clients under my belt. I was also nannying for a family, and I was working at a chiropractor's office.
Oh my God. What was that? Was that
Yes.
like 17 jobs you just listed at the
That
same
was
time?
like 17. It's like 4, but in the world of New York City,
If you
that's
round
like
up, yeah.
20 jobs, because you have I mean I would be going from auditioning in like anywhere from like the meatpacking district to like Midtown. Then the
Right.
family that I nannied for was on the Upper West Side. The chiropractor's office was in Midtown East.
Oh
And then
my
I had to
God.
find a place that had Wi-Fi and a plug so I could write.
Wow. This is like the life of an Uber driver. You were ahead of your time.
I really was ahead of my time. I used to have conversations like this with Uber drivers actually, because they'd be telling me about their day and I'm like, okay, you ready? Here we go. This is what I've done. This is where I've been today. You know, I took a 9-year-old to
Yeah.
gymnastics. I wrote a sales page. I got people into the right rooms for chiropractic care. You know what I mean? Like I had done so much by the time a day would end.
What advice do you have for somebody that is in a situation where they are working 2, 3, 4 job, like doing all that to make ends meet? How do you stay productive and successful at each of those without getting like crazy burnt out because it's so much effort?
Oh my gosh, it's such a good question. And I don't know if I have like a sexy answer, because I feel like I
Uh,
was burnt out, you know? I feel like I was. I feel like I have a natural like go-getter in me. You know, my husband and I will always say this about me. I'm kind of like a little New York City like subway rat. Like I can make it work. You
That's
know,
a hell of a metaphor.
yeah, like I can find the bits of granola and the dropped kind bar and hop on the N train and make my way. Like I'll always figure it out. So I've always had that mentality. So I actually really thrived in that environment because I liked being busy. And above all of it gave me an opportunity to connect with people, which is what I really love to do most. So I'd get to talk to people in an audition with the girls, nannying the girls. There was obviously never a dull moment. like at the chiropractor's office. Oh my God, I had so much fun, and then I'd have my alone time when I was writing. But I would say to somebody that, I respect anybody who that's what they have to do for a while, because I know that's what I had to do for a long time. But I would say eventually you got to kind of narrow in and figure out how you can, maybe bring that 4 jobs at least down to 2, maybe,
Right.
if you
Yeah.
can.
And where can you go deeper and where you're more passionate?
Yeah.
I love that analogy. That's great imagery there. So next time I see a subway rat, I'll think of you. But
Thank you. Thank you. They're very resilient.
yes. Never thought of them in that light before, but it's
They
true.
are. And they're quick.
Yes. So you're working 4 jobs and eventually got that down and realized like your main passion is this writing world. And now you've built a copy business and you're building out your brand and your personal brand from the copywriting sense as well. So this is something that I kind of geek out about as well, because I just find the written word so fascinating, because there's so many things you can do with it, and it can make such a big difference for you in your business and how you present yourself. So for starters, how would you define great copy?
I would define great copy that your audience, is really, that they love to read, and they keep coming back for more. They keep showing up, that you kind of become like essential reading to them. And the components that go into that is, it's kind of this really awesome marriage between your credibility and also your personality being at the top there, because that's really how you stand out from the crowd online, is your personality, is what makes you truly, as I talk about with my clients, quote, uncopyable, right? And the
I
and
like it.
what you have to be uncopyable is actually your personality. And each of us have something unique that we can bring to the table. So for example, like we've been saying about me, I realized that I could bring everything that I learned as an actor into copy, and I actually use it. I say on the enrollment page for the Copy Confidence Society, I say why you should learn, why you should discover how to be great at copy from a Harvard acting grad. So I was able to kind of find what that part of my personality, and then also just who I am. Like I don't just talk about in my copy, just copy tips. That's definitely one of my themes with my audience, of course, is copy tips. But I also talk about my marriage. I talk about my grandpa. I talk about my dog Jake. My audience like loves Jake. If
Shout out
Jake,
Jake.
shout out to Jake. Like it's for sure. I put something up that after the last round of the copy chat, I said, hey, I put a picture of Jake. I said, hey, Jake wants your feedback. What did you love about this series, this season of the copy chat? And I'm not kidding, Max. People were like, well, Jake, like writing back to Jake.
Oh yeah, I'm sure people get into it.
Yeah. So it allows people to like, and I got so much great feedback of like what people liked and what they really were learning from this season, because they felt kind of comfortable and fun to like talk to my dog.
When you slice it that way. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so true. I like your focus on the personal aspect as well, because that is incredibly true, that like you are you, nobody else can be you. And so you need to use that to your advantage. You need to be open about who you are and about your background. And you can use that, it's like, it's not like people are going around and like always assuming that anybody who's good at copy is going to have a Harvard acting background. Like that's just something that's about your personality, and it works well for you. So it just bodes well when you go about it that way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the definition or kind of intro to great copy. And we could use any word in addition to great, spectacular, fabulous. We can just go on and on and on.
Right.
But effective copy. But can you share some tips on how to create copy that's, as you say, killer or effective from that regard?
Yeah. I would say whenever you're looking at certain words, if you can't, speaking of acting, if you can't film it or play it in a scene, then you haven't been specific enough. So lots of times, let's say, so my students, we just finished this round of the Write Your Website workshop, and my students will say like, I'll show you these amazing tips for moms. So one of my students, for example, was teaching moms how to go plant-based for the whole family. And she has this program, kind of like the plant-based method. And one of the things she was saying in there before we kind of edited it was, okay, these are, amazing tips for mom and easy to find ingredients. And I was like, okay, what does that mean though to this mom? Like, how do we actually paint the image so that the mom sees herself, that you kind of create the movie in your mind? Which is from a musical, by the way, Miss Saigon. There's a song called Movie in My Mind. So shout out to even
I,
more theater references here
I was
today.
assumed there was going to be one or two theater
So
references in this.
how do you create the movie in my mind? So instead I was like, so what do you mean by this? And she's like, well, they're not going to be running around Kroger, looking for, I can't remember what she said, like whistle seed. I can't remember what she said now because the ingredient was so obscure.
Yeah.
But I was like, all right, just that pops off the page more than saying, and I'm like, what's amazing mean? And she's like, even your picky toddler will eat it. And I was like, awesome. So that's what we need to say instead. Even your toddler will be grabbing for the tofu. I'm just making this up, grabbing for the tofu chicken, and it won't require you running around Kroger screaming, where's the whistle seed?
Right.
Right.
That is
That's
certainly
way
a
better.
specific. Yeah.
Yes, it's more specific. And I always say to my students and my clients, where can we take whatever is descriptive, like adjectives, descriptive language, and bring it to the more specific, like create the little piece of theater?
How do you brainstorm in that sense? Like, how do you turn something from ordinary words to like specific, loud, like vibrant, thriving examples?
Yeah. When I'm talking, this is a great question. So
Thank you.
when I do it with my clients, my students on the spot, is I just ask them, like I said to my student, I was like, so what does this mean for you? Let's just talk it out. What do you mean by amazing? Like, what's an example of that? So first, what I'll say is, do you have an example of this for yourself? Because a lot of times, right, we either can fall into kind of two camps. I describe it like, in To Kill a Mockingbird, when Atticus says to Scout, like, you won't know what it's like to be a person till you walk a mile in their shoes, till you crawl
Yes.
around in their skin. So some people fall into that category. They're like, I was once where you were. So I've been there. Maybe you're a health coach that like struggled with your weight, you lost weight, and now you show other people how. So you fall into like that Atticus Finch category. So sometimes for my students, they have an example from their own life that we can draw upon, and they just need to be asked for it to come out.
Hmm.
And then for others of us, we fall into I call it like practical magic, which is, that movie with Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman, actually based on a really great book by Alice Hoffman. And it's the idea that the people in the town are coming to knock on the aunt's doors for the remedy that they have, the perfect potion. So that falls into the category of like where I'm at. Like, I've always had a knack for being able to take people's thoughts and make it into compelling virtual copy, right? So I fall into the practical magic category. And so sometimes for that category, I have to then ask for their clients. Okay, so what piece of social proof, what does amazing mean to your client? And then usually we start to peel back the layers and we get some sort of language that pops. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, it's very relatable, and being relatable and using those examples is clearly so powerful from a copy and language standpoint. Can you give us some examples of how brightening up or making your copy more spectacular can lead to business results?
Yeah. So first off, when you have personality like that, what happens is, so for the case of my student, right? Now a mom who wants to go plant-based and reads this, she's nodding her head the whole time thinking, wow, it's like she's speaking right to me. This is what I'm going through. Yeah, I have been that mom in Kroger, searching for, whatever the obscure ingredient is. This is
Yeah,
the
like
person for me.
instant Blake seed or whatever, whatever the name.
Yeah, instant scene, right? Instant recognition, right? We always want to we want to feel like people get us. And then when you add these spices of your personality, people just want to be around you. I talk a lot about, like, I'm obsessed with the Real Housewives. So I talk about the Real
No.
Housewives all the time in my copy. And I have students that come to me that say, Marisa, I don't even care about the Real Housewives, but just the way that you talk about it, you just make me laugh. And I just want to be around you. So sometimes just being a real human and having stuff that you like and a point of view is very attractive to people, as opposed to being like general wishy-washy and being worried what people will think or offending people. Sometimes not sometimes, always having a bold point of view is really where people are like, it might repel some people, but it's going to like uber compel the right people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I definitely picked up a few things on the Real Housewives that I had no clue about before we connected on Instagram a little while back. So.
That's so funny. Yeah. And so that's another thing that I do is, and I think this is for anybody, any pop culture or thing that you love, I know, I'm sure if you sat for a little bit, you could find a way to connect that back to your business. Actually, Max, you did it earlier when you brought up the NBA player.
Hmm.
Like you just took a moment of something that you like, sports, basketball, your team, like you said, the Cavs, you just
All
related
right,
it back
lucky
to
guess.
business. Yeah. So that's an opportunity. Like if you were to write an email or do an Instagram story or something where you could tell that little brief story about that, what one of your favorite NBA players does to get into the routine and relate that back to for business owners.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cause I think I forget the stats for this, but it's something like, well, I'm not even going to put out a number, but I just know it's so much easier for people to internalize things and remember them when they hear it in like a metaphor form or analogy form.
100%.
Also like 100%, like when you know something well enough that you can explain it to somebody else and like use analogies and metaphor when you explain it to somebody else, that's when you like truly know your topic and know your content. So
Hmm.
it's cool that that flows through in copy as well.
Yeah, I do this a lot where I'll try, I was back in the fall, my husband and I were watching Beetlejuice during Halloween.
Okay,
And
that makes sense.
that makes sense, right? And then during the part where, Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin, they see the ad that Beetlejuice has about, to work with him, basically. I made my husband pause because I was like, oh my gosh, look at this ad, Beetlejuice's ad. This is like the greatest copy I've ever seen. I was like, Beetlejuice is the greatest copywriter ever. And so I wrote a whole email breaking down that ad, breaking down Beetlejuice's ad. And people loved it. My inbox was filled with responses.
That's awesome.
So find your stuff that you love and talk about it and find ways to relate it back to your business.
That's awesome. Yeah, because it just keeps it exciting that way too, as opposed to just being like, all right, here's today's lecture.
Oh gosh, no, no one wants that.
Right.
Nobody wants to feel like you're on their soapbox at them, right? They want like the inside scoop, but they don't want to be lectured to. And remember, like storytelling in that way is our oldest form of communication. So anytime we can find that in, and we're all going to have a different in, it just makes it easier when you get to the tip. And it's just a simple segue to say, so why am I telling you about Beetlejuice's copy? Because I think you should probably Beetlejuice your brand a little bit more. You know what I mean? You can always find that segue.
Right. Also, I'm an affiliate of the Beetlejuice movie. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. And I get money if you go watch the movie.
Right.
Michael
Right.
Keaton is personally coming to my house.
Right. Yeah. You got to watch out for that. So there's something that I've been thinking about for a while is in terms of copy. There's so many different social media platforms and touch points you have with your clients and prospects and just anyone these days, whether it's your website, your email newsletter, your social media platforms, like LinkedIn, Instagram. So out of all of these, at the time of this recording, where would you say, and I'm not going to let you say everywhere because that's the easy answer, but
Mhm.
where would you say is the most important place right now to focus on making sure your copy is absolutely full of your personality and really buttoned up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the answer is twofold. One, where your audience is where you have to be. So you got to find out where your audience is hanging out. Is your audience a Facebook crowd? Is your audience an Instagram crowd? Is your audience a Twitter crowd? God help us. I like to say
or
up
Twitch.
right. TikTok, whatever it is. Like I like so for me, it's first going, where is my audience? Right? Where are they spending time? And then the other thing that I always ask myself is what are the places that I know I will show up to? I actually would never say everywhere because I think that I don't think that especially today online that you want to be a jack of all trades. Like you want to be showing up in one, maybe two places max. Oh,
Were
no
you
pun
talking to me?
intended. Max.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was definitely
Found it.
intended, but I
I know I
appreciate it.
said it and I was like, that's perfect. One to two places. I got
One
to
to
say it
two
again,
places,
max.
Marisa.
Yes, one to two places, Marisa, so that you can actually focus and see traction there. If you're trying to be on Facebook, your Facebook page and a group and Instagram and Twitter, people can sense. Here's another acting thing. Like when you used to walk into the casting director for casting director, they can like smell where like the desperation or like a monologue you've done 50 times and you're just phoning it in. They
Yeah.
can tell, and then you're not going to get the job, right? So it's like if you have focus, so I always make my students in the Copy Confidence Society, when we get to like content calendar and all that, pick like 1 to 2 platforms where they're going to show up. So for me, my email list, that's a non-negotiable. That's like my place. That's like my living room. That's like the intimate place. But then
Yeah.
besides that, it's like social media wise, my focus is then inside the Copy Chat Facebook group. That's where, if you want to see me go live, that's where you got to show up. That's where I put most of my focus. And then Instagram is my other one, also because I just love it there and I get it and my audience is there. So those are my 2 places where and so notice I didn't say like my Facebook business page. I'm just focused on my Facebook group and Instagram, right? I
Yeah.
keep it that simple.
Well, you're just killer with these analogies. They keep coming because I've never heard an email newsletter described as a living room, but that's such a
Yeah.
good way to look at it because
Yeah.
when you, and I'll give an example here just to keep the examples coming. I know you are familiar with and a big fan as well of Anne Hanley.
And Hanley, if you're listening to us, we love you. I know
Yes,
she's already
and
been
well,
on here. I
right,
feel like I'm one
exactly.
step closer to her because she's spoken to you through these same like wavelengths.
Your fellow Wild Business Growth Podcast alumni. So
Oh my God, that's amazing.
the Hall of Fame, the Wild Hall of Fame.
My life
But
is, it's complete.
but she's an amazing example, and I know you have such a powerful voice as well. But to use somebody who's not in the podcast right now, Anne Hanley is, when you get her newsletter, just her personal newsletter, like not even like a marketing profs newsletter. When I see that in my inbox, I like just stop whatever I'm doing and I read it, and I know it's always going to be something entertaining, and it's always going to be in her voice. Like
Same.
she's so good with that.
It's so like that newsletter that comes out every other Sunday. I like will reach
Yeah.
over to my phone on the nightstand like a little kid. I'm like, it's Anne Hanley Sunday. And I read
Everybody
that
stop what
thing.
you're doing.
And you know what? Going back to this whole story idea, Anne is amazing, right? Let's just spend the rest of the interview is about Anne. But Anne talks so brilliantly in the beginning of every one of those newsletters with some story, a place that she's spoken at, a conversation she had with an Uber driver. I don't know if you remember the one where it was like the water bottles and the teddy bear in her room or the
Yeah.
polar bear, right? It all is what we were just talking about a few minutes ago. She leads in with a story and then she hits you with the tips.
Right. And it's something that's always, it just has a fresh feel to it. Like it's something
Yes.
that happened to her recently and something. So it's just, and it's actually easier that way because you're more or less documenting or curating stuff that's actually happened to you. You're not like, head down in a room, like a dark room with one light bulb, just trying to figure out the idea,
No,
like
and I think
interrogating yourself, trying to figure out your idea for,
yeah.
weeks.
And I'm sure if we had Anne here, she'd say that kind of maybe she might know some things she's got to get out that week. And then she probably, and I know I do this for myself. Let's say I know, okay, I got to reverse engineer. Okay. Like for example, I was on another podcast a few weeks ago where I talked a lot about subject lines.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that was like the main focus of it. So when I sent the email to my community about, hey, I'm on this, I had to sit for a second and reverse engineer and go, okay, I want people to listen to this interview, right? Like an actor, what's the intention? I want them to go listen to this interview because I know that subject lines are really important. Well, what is a pain point around subject lines for people? Well, usually there's a lot of pressure. They don't know the right one to choose. It feels like so much pressure. So, okay, well, I have these 3 formulas that make it easy to kind of choose from. And then I go, okay, well, do I have an example from my own life where a formula helped me out that I could like start this email off with that little story and then lead into the podcast? So I was like, well, what's a story in my life where I felt a lot of pressure? And then like having a formula or something to go off really helped me. And then that's kind of how I created the email, was working backwards, if that makes sense.
That's brilliant because we all experience so many different things, and
Yeah.
it's just a shame if you don't use any of that into
Right.
your own writing or copywriting or branding or marketing or everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I sat there for a second. I was like, what's an example of that? And I just let myself think. Sometimes you got to like take your marketer hat off and put your creative hat on. And so for a minute, I just sat there, what's an example? And then all of a sudden I had had a text conversation a few minutes before that with my mother-in-law. And I went, oh, my mother-in-law, because when they were building their house is like baller, by the way. And the kitchen is like right out of Joanna Gaines. And I remember her saying it was overwhelming, but then they gave you a couple layouts to choose from. And once I had the layout, I could customize from there. So that's how the email starts, was about my mother-in-law's baller kitchen.
Everybody loves their mother-in-law's baller kitchen.
My in-laws have the illest kitchen you've ever seen. It's like,
I thought you were going to whip out Trill there for a second too.
oh, I love that. This kitchen makes no sense. It's like, it's a dream. I always feel like Joanna Gaines and like Chip are going to pop out of the woodwork. It's perfect, And so I said that, I'm like, you have this she had this formula to go off of to create this awesome kitchen. Maybe you need this in your copy, most specifically with subject lines. Well, lucky for you, I talked about this today in a podcast. So go swipe my formulas.
Bam.
Bam.
Well said. That's going to be a quote. I'm just going to say bam.
Bam.
Marisa.
I think that's already Emerald Lagasse, but maybe we can.
No. Yeah, I'm sure we'll.
Steal that from him.
He's never used that before, but.
Yeah.
Imagine you started your own podcast. You're growing your brand, sharing your expertise, maybe even your terrible puns, and meeting fascinating people. That is awesome. Now, imagine all the hours you've lost every week due to the podcast's demands. Not so awesome. I am your podcast producer. Email me at max@hippodirect.com. So speaking of creative hats, would love to dive into a different segment called Inspiration and Creativity.
Mm-hmm.
So think about how you stay inspired and creative. I know it sounds crazy compared to the name of the segment, but what do you do to stay creative?
Gosh, I don't know if my answers are even going to be like sexy or good, but here we go. This is what I do. I go outside a lot. Like I moved from New York City to Atlanta for more sunshine, and I try to use it as much as I can. Like get away from my desk and just go do things with my husband. Like be out and about is huge for me. Like getting the energy from other people, because that's how I get my stories. Conversations with people really get me going. I actually I read a lot. And that keeps me energized. Reading really great books, like books of really great fiction, really great memoirs. I devour magazines, from like trashy magazines to like, I don't know, the quote unquote good ones. And I watch a lot of Netflix too, because I feel like I can always find something to point back to my audience. And those things like really keep me inspired. Like I can watch an episode of something and I'll be like, oh, that's a great tip. That's a great metaphor for business. I'm always on the hunt for my next metaphor.
I can see that. You're like a metaphor hunter. How was that one?
Am.
That was pretty good, right?
Yeah, I am like a metaphor hunter. I don't know like what my costume would be for that, but yes, I'm always on the hunt of how
a hunter, maybe.
Yeah. I guess I would be a hunter, but like instead of, what do they carry? What does a metaphor hunter carry?
Metaphors, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, like but that's
I think I'm thinking like SpongeBob's butterfly or jellyfish catching net.
Yes, something like that. Yes, exactly. I was like, that's what I meant to say. What's the weapon? Like, what's the thing? I get it. Yeah, but yeah, that's what I do.
It's interesting there because it's a mix of outside. Like you at the start of that, it was kind of like you need to be outside, but it's also the importance of books and magazines and Netflix as well. So there's kind of the yin yang there, kind of opposites there. On the outside front, what are your favorite activities to do outside? Like, is it walking, or do you have like other, hobbies you like to do?
Yeah, I love to run. I'm a runner, and I get a lot of great ideas just from running, like having my iPod in. And do people even use iPods anymore? I think that's false. My phone.
You can use it. It's okay.
Wherever music comes from now.
Maybe the iPod Mini.
Yeah, and that's, so that's huge for me is running. And yeah, walking like with my husband sometimes. In Atlanta, we have what's called the belt line. And sometimes just like walking the belt line and just talking things out, like having conversations with him as my sounding board. I'll have to ask him if he likes that. But I mean, we've been together for 9 years, so hopefully he does.
I would think so.
I would think so. That's what I do sometimes is we'll take a walk on the belt line and I'll just talk it out with him.
And then on the other side of things, what comes to your mind? I'm not going to let you list too many, but as far as like a book or Netflix show or magazine that you have read or watched and you like afterwards, you were just like totally inspired, like bursting with ideas. What comes to mind there?
Yep. Number one, Cosmo magazine.
Of course.
Cosmo is built. The cover of Cosmo, it's the best copy. It's meant to get you reading. And you can swipe a lot of those for your own subject lines, headlines, and captions. Pro tip.
Really?
Yeah. You can take it and just convert it to what it would sound like for you. So if it,
Decosmoize it or
yeah,
cosmoize it.
decosmo, I call it the Cosmo concept. It's one of my subject line formulas.
Wow. That's good. That's good.
So do that. Netflix, gosh. Okay, you know the show You that was on with the
Me?
guy from Gossip Girl?
No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I know.
It's called
It was,
You.
yeah. It was super, super
Yeah.
popular.
So I did an entire live training on that about how his copy skills, his ability to know his ideal client. I mean, he was stalking her, but you get what I'm saying. He knew his ideal client so well. He was resilient. He
Some would
added
say
in
too
bits.
well.
Yeah. Not as well as he did. So that was something I connected. And then book wise, a big book for me lately that I reread is The Big Leap, which is like, an old, I mean, it's been around for a little bit, but it always gets me every time I read it and reminds me of, we kind of throw around those, people kind of throw around as a buzzword like zone of genius, genius zone.
Yeah.
But if you really read it of how he's talking about it in the book, it really reminds you of like getting clear on what you really, really want to be doing and what you're really, really good at. So that always gets me jazzed whenever I read that.
Jazz. Well, we like jazzed. And
Mm-hmm.
then how about on the people side? So for here, think of people who inspire you. Think back to around the time that you were thinking you still wanted to be in the acting world. But then over time, somebody really recognized that you had this talent for copywriting, and somebody also, or maybe it was a group of people, gave you the confidence and support to say, hey, you can do this, you can build this business, and you can focus this in this copy world for other business owners. Who would you say has been most helpful or inspiring to you in that sense?
Yeah. Personally, it'd be my friend. She's like my sister. Her name is Diana. I owe my entire business to Di. I would have never, ever done this if it wasn't for Di. She was the first person to tell me, hey, I think you'd be good at this. And every time I would say, oh, I don't know, she would help find me a new client and she would encourage me. And even, 2 years ago when I left acting behind, I said, well, what am I going to do now? And she said, I know that you're going to create something. She was the person who told me that I could create the copy chat, that I could she was the one who told me, I'll never forget that day. It was like in 2018. She goes, I know that next year you could make $250,000. At the time, I ended 2018 making $50,000. So I was like, okay, Di. Okay. But Di always has this big vision for me. And she was right. I did. I went from making 50,000 to 250,000 in 1 year.
Wow.
So everything that Di has always told me is true. So I would suggest getting a Diana in your life.
I was going to say, wait, how busy is her time? I feel like
she is
a lot
busy.
of people
She's
will
a
be
parent
calling
coach. She works with parents and families. She has her own incredible program called Family Legacy. She's based in New York City and she's incredible. But she
her. Oh,
just
wow.
has that big vision for people. And she has that big vision for me and is the reason I am so successful. And then, people that I watched before me, like looking at someone like Laura Belgray, who I now consider a mentor and somebody that I just so great to be in her orbit. But watching someone like Laura make a business as a copywriter and go, shit, this is possible. You can do this, and just watching Laura lead with her personality and not compromise on it and show up fully as herself. I was like, okay, I think I can find what that is for me. And in someone like Ann Handley too, watching women say,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you can do this. That'd be
Yeah.
my answer.
Yeah. That's so helpful. I feel like sometimes you need, like, it's definitely a healthy mix. Like sometimes you need someone who has, pioneered that path or carved that path before and is really leading by example or by what they're doing. But every now and then, like it goes so much, it goes beyond words, but it's ironic because you're using words, but it's like beyond words, the impact of how powerful it is when somebody tells you like, hey, I believe in you, or like, I know you will do this, or like, I know you're a leader or something like that, like sometimes you just need that little bit to really get you fired up.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And I think having Di in my back pocket for so many years, I was really lucky in that way. I had this like person who was working with kids and families, like, coaching me for free, basically, like always keeping me in check of saying, no, you're capable of this. This is what you're capable of.
Well, Di sounds awesome.
She is awesome.
So let's get to a fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
The Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
Cool.
Yeah, I guess. Wild business shout out of the week. This is where we talk about a recent brand or campaign that caught our attention. And it depends when you're listening to this, but at the time of this recording, things are pretty crazy in the world with a certain virus, and it's just pretty crazy. It's obviously a very serious matter, and we're not going to talk about it much today. But on the complete other side of things, so in the marketing world, kind of an unfortunate fallback that's happened from this is I know the brand Corona has been struggling due to the news, and a lot of people are kind of just scared away, and then we've seen business loss because of it, just because of the name, and it has nothing to do with the name. So that's a whole, unfortunate situation on top of an unfortunate situation. So we chatted before, and you had the great idea to actually shed some positive life on the brand Corona today. So what example do you have about Corona for the shout out?
Yes, Corona. One of a campaign I saw them do, and I don't think it was over here in the US, but I read about, was that they had these vending machines. They had partnered kind of, with the initiative to like recycle and clean up plastic. And so they were putting these vending machines in places where you could bring a plastic bottle, insert it into the vending machine, and a Corona would come out. Like a Corona in a glass bottle would come out. So I just thought it was so genius because it was raising brand awareness, right? But it was also giving back, had a community kind of project. And I'm pretty sure that the other thing that they did was they also partnered, and I can't remember with who, but they, went and cleaned up some beaches and stuff as well, and like cleaned up plastic. So it was this amazing kind of give back and raising awareness about the brand at the same time. And it hit me because it's similar to what I and my team decided to do with a copy chat, which is that the copy chat each time we do a season is free to listen to. But if you want to buy lifetime access to the interviews, because we really dive into one very particular part of copy, so it's worth to go back and listen to again as you're working on that piece of copy. We find that people want the interview, so we bundle them up in this thing called the copy chat kit. And so what we did after season 3 was all the profits we made from the copy chat kit, we donated to the Headstrong Project, which works with post 9/11 military vets on the mental health care that they need and deserve. So we were able to raise over $13,000 in just a few weeks,
Wow, that's
which was
amazing.
really, really cool. So yeah, I feel like what Corona is doing and what we kind of did with the coffee chat is something I really want more people to be talking about, is like how you can be this face of modern philanthropy, and how having a business online and the coaching space, like we're primed to be able to give back in this way. It just takes a little bit of thinking outside the box a little bit.
Yeah, definitely, or outside the can for Corona.
Yep,
But
outside the can. Yep.
so I mean, they nailed it with their campaign, and they're doing a ton to give back. You're doing the same with yours in the copy chat, so it's really cool. It's really cool what you're doing, and also that clearly there's some strong parallels there with the campaign. For anybody who's not familiar with, since we're talking about copy chat, I did want to hit on it a little bit. For anybody who's not familiar with the copy chat, how would you describe it? Because I know it's something that you're really passionate about, and it's a really cool thing that you've created as part of your business.
Yeah. So another acting metaphor is that, I
No.
know when I started, there's a ton. When I, decided to go full out in my business, my writing business, I remembered back to a lot of my friends who had kind of quote unquote made it as actors and what they did before that happened. And a lot of them created their own work. So they created a web series or started doing stand up or had a one woman show. And that's kind of how they got seen. And so I thought, okay, how could I create my own work in the copy space? And that's how I created the copy chat. And so the copy chat is my a virtual summit that brings together other rock star copywriters, business coaches, and online strategists. And each interview gives you like one doable tip to create copy that attracts clients, makes money, and creates a massive movement online. And so each interview dives into one very specific tip. And it's our goal that you as a listener, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, coach, creative, can walk away and actually go and implement that tip. Whether we're talking about subject lines or the 3 things your website needs or how to tackle Instagram stories, we kind of look at all different areas of copy. And we just finished our 3rd season. It's really awesome. I absolutely love it. And we get really incredible feedback from people that say that, they listen to all the interviews and they take notes and they show up. It's really cool.
Wow, congrats on that. It's really cool. Like you building this awesome brand beforehand, and then you just add something to it. You just add something to it that makes perfect sense and also really resonates with people. So big copy chat fan.
Thank you. Yeah, it's brought a lot of awesome people into my life because I bring in other people to interview, similar to what you're doing here. So it just gets you to have that human to human connection with people and have really great conversations, and it has an impact for people.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So let's get to a segment called the unusual. So
Okay.
think pet peeve. I know it's very, like fasten your seatbelt or like several seatbelts. Pet peeves, quirks, and weird talents. So what's your biggest pet peeve?
Oh my gosh, my biggest pet peeve. You know what? I'll be honest with you. You know when you say to people like, "Hi, how are you?" and they go, "I'm well," and they don't ask you how you are back.
Oh yeah.
That's my answer. If you get in an elevator with somebody and go, "Hey, Max, how are you?" Or I wouldn't know you, but you know what I mean. If I'm saying like you get in an elevator with a stranger and you go, "Hey, how are you?" and the person goes, "I'm well," and they don't say it back to you. That drives me nuts.
When you started saying that, I thought you were talking about people that say I'm well instead of I'm good. But now I realize it's a different part of
No,
it's
I
a
don't.
different
Yeah,
part of the whole situation.
I won't hate on the "I'm good" versus "I'm well." I will hate on you for not asking me if I'm well or good.
It makes me think back when I was a little kid, I was so shy that people would say, "How's it go?" Like I remember it was like a big growing up moment for me when I like started saying, "How are you?" back to people. It was like, wow, okay, it's starting to crack out of his shell a little bit.
Yeah, you're right. Max, you just taught me something here because I never looked at it like that. Because I'm such an extrovert that I've
Mm.
always thought that it was like rude
Yeah, it
that people
could.
didn't respond. But you're right. It could just be that they're not a little NYC sewer rat like me.
That's true. That could very well be possible. But I'm not giving an excuse for everyone. But I'm sure there is an element of shy just for some of that circumstance. But they're probably. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that just are like, yeah, screw you, go away. So who knows?
It's a mix of both.
Definitely a healthy mix. How about quirks? What's something that is quirky about your personality? Your sewer rat personality. No, your subway rat. Your personality that maybe your husband or maybe somebody calls you out for. That's a little bit unique, but it's something. It's like it's who you are. Like you're not going to change that.
I asked my husband about this actually, and he said like I do these weird impressions a lot of different
Really?
people. Yeah, or I'll
All right.
make up
Like
these
who are your
characters.
favorites?
I'll make up my own character sometimes, and then I'll speak to
Really?
him like that. Yeah, it'll be like, the like some like I don't even I'm trying to think. Or I'll do like I do a really great Margaret Josephs impression from The Real Housewives of New Jersey.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not as familiar with it, but you should definitely do that right now, just for like a
Oh
line
my
or two.
gosh, that is such pressure because now it's not going to be good.
I think it's going to sound fantastic.
But whenever they're interviewing her and she's always like, I mean, please, Teresa. I mean, please, why would you even speak to her? I mean, she's not even worth your time. I mean, Danielle, I mean, please. I mean, like, who invited her here? I can't, please.
Oh
So
my god.
I thank you. Bow and scene.
I can see the acting background there.
So I will often walk around our house and just talk like Margaret to my husband. I'll be like, Eric, please. I mean, like, what are you even thinking?
That's great. I'm sure she has some great thoughts about that too.
I love her. Call me Margaret. I love you.
How about weird talents? So in addition to impressions and acting in books and running and all the above, what's something that you would say you're like really talented at, but it doesn't have an impact on your business. So like it could be something like I've had guests on before talk about how they're like just have a knack for hanging up pictures perfectly straight or like opening blinds all the way or like it could be a memory trick, something like that.
That's a good question. Um, I'm really
Thank you.
great. I'm a really great rapper.
Really?
Yeah.
So you
Uh,
can do impressions and rap. Like
yeah,
you're
I can.
a Renaissance woman.
Yeah, at my wedding, I rapped to Will Smith's Men in Black.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did in my wedding dress.
Oh my God.
It's actually helped my business though, because it's how I got somebody to say yes to the copy chat because I sent them that video.
Do you like seek out new songs and to learn their lyrics and have songs so you can rap to?
Yes, yes. Well, Jay-Z is a real huge influence on me ever since I was younger. I feel like listening to his music is poetry and learning about I've learned so much just by listening to him. And so I love to listen to Jay-Z and like try and learn as much of it as I can. Yeah, Jay-Z and like Will Smith, which don't really go together that much, but yeah, those are kind of my two, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, well, they've both done okay with their careers.
Yeah,
So, would love to wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
sure.
All right, let's get wild. What is your number one song all time to rap to?
Uh Jay-Z's, it's called Hova, Izzo.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, that's a
H
classic.
to the Izzo, V to the yeah. That's
There
my
you go.
that's my
There you go.
go-to.
You just rapped without even trying.
Yeah.
Which Real Housewives show is your favorite?
This is hard. This is so hard. Well, my favorite is Bethany Frankel, and she's on Real Housewives of New York, or she used to be. But if I had to choose, I'd say Real Housewives of New Jersey.
Oh, there you go. All right, so you got, you're taking the tri-state area one by one.
Hmm.
What's your favorite musical of all time?
Oh my gosh, my favorite musical of all time. There's no way I could ever choose. I would put In the Heights up there. In the Heights is one of my absolute favorites, and probably Les Mis. It was the first musical I ever saw when I was 6, so that was huge.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a classic as well.
Hmm.
And I asked this to Anne, so I have to ask you as well. What is your favorite word to write?
My favorite word to write, jazzed.
That's a good one.
I say jazzed a lot.
Hers was shenanigans. So those are two very, very fun words. I like it.
That's fun.
And then,
I lied to you, by the way. My favorite musical is Jesus Christ Superstar.
oh, okay.
Please
we
amend.
gotta, yeah, okay.
No, I'm kidding. I lied
Amended.
to you though, but go ahead.
Consider it amended. It's all right.
Okay.
We lie all the time here. If you could only read one magazine for the rest of your life and it couldn't be Cosmo, what would that be?
Uh, the Magnolia Journal, Joanna Gaines.
Knew it. I didn't know it, but it sounds good. Uh, all right. Well, Marisa, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your story and your metaphors and your rapping and how to create just amazing copy and how it can help your business. So thank you so much for coming on. And where's the best place for people to connect with you and to check out what the Copy Chat is all about?
Yeah, the best place to come on over to is the Copy Chat Facebook group. That's where you can see me go live and do impressions and talk about copy. The Copy Chat Facebook group is the best place. And of course, my website at marissacorcoran.com. But even just coming right over to the Facebook group, because you can get all those other things just from being part of that.
Perfect. It's like coming to your living room. No,
Yeah.
that was for your newsletter, but still.
The Facebook group is kind of like my living room. Someone once told me it was like being in my living room with me. I thought that was cool.
There we go. All right. So so come to Maurice, damn it. I was doing so good with the name. So come to Maurice's living room. And final thoughts here. Send us off. Stage is yours. It could be a quote, it could be a line, it could be, your favorite line from Izzo. Take us off here.
Can I swear?
Uh-huh.
So then it's Jay-Z is when he says in Izzo, he says, and we all need to live by this. He says, he who does not feel me is not real to me. Therefore, he doesn't exist. So poof, vamoose, son of a bitch.
Bam. All right. I was waiting for the swear word. That was awesome. I always thought he had the best use of poof vamoose in a rap song ever.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Marisa, and see you at the next freestyle battle.
Yeah. See you there. Thanks, Max.
Marisa, the copy rapper. Thank you, Marisa, for coming on the show and sharing all your knowledge and wisdom and impressions. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning into another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on Good Pods, where you can find all the podcasts your friends, family, and other favorite people are listening to. For more, you can dive into our marketing and business growth resources at hippodirect.com/blog and hippodirect.com/newsletter. That newsletter is the Hippo Digest, and it's your place for wild marketing ideas every single week. And finally, to the Izzo, make sure to connect with us on your favorite social media platforms at the handles Hippo Direct and Max Branstetter. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!